Welcome to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. This show is about Plymouth County real estate. Our headline for the month was February recordings are slightly up. What will the spring market bring? I have a great guest on the second segment of the show talking about barriers to home ownership. And in the first segment, we obviously go through our numbers and then a little bit of our Plymouth County and Plymouth Colony history. So let's go right to the numbers. You can see the bar chart of deeds, a slight drop off from January to February, and a little bit of increase from February this year compared to February last year. There are 421 deeds recorded in February, less than the 513 in January, and that's 1% more than last year. However, because we had a good January, we're up 12% year to date. You're going to see a listing of all sales of every one of our 27 communities, from Abington down to Whitman. Plymouth and Brockton generate the most sales historically and continue to do so. You're going to see a bar chart for mortgages. You track mortgages very closely. You can see the mortgages dropped off in February from January, but they're 13% higher than last February. And year to date, we're up 13%. You're going to see a bar chart for foreclosure deeds. We've followed foreclosures very closely since the meltdown in 2008. There was a moratorium on foreclosure deeds during COVID, and the numbers really have not bumped up again. That doesn't say people aren't facing difficulty paying their mortgage. That just shows the lenders haven't really pursued that. And last but not least, in terms of our bar chart, you'll see there were 35 notices versus 39 in January, much lower than last February. But a foreclosure notice is the first thing we see recorded at the Registry of Deeds when someone's in trouble, when they're having difficulty paying their mortgage and usually slip behind. If you're finding yourself in trouble, reach out to a federal housing counselor like NeighborWorks and see what they can do to help you out and modify your loan. You're going to see another image of all the foreclosure deeds and notices for the 27 communities in Plymouth County, and you can see there are still a lot of zeros there. And again, Brockton, Plymouth, and Wareham have traditionally been the highest, but there are still a lot of zeros across the board. I want to make sure everyone realizes that there's an opportunity to be alert against fraud. We offer a free fraud alert program. If you go to our website, PlymouthDeeds.org, and go to the resources section, you'll see fraud alert. You put your name and your email in that, and anything recorded against your name, you'll get an email, and you can verify what went on record. Maybe it's something you wanted to on record, like a mortgage discharge or a homestead, but if it's something you don't know about, you should check it out right away and try to figure out what the problem is. I have a great guest coming up in the second segment of the show, Eileen Cain of William Ravis Real Estate. We're going to talk a little bit about barriers to home ownership. I think that'll be a very important discussion. We're starting to see a turn to the spring market, but I think what Eileen will say as an on-the-ground realtor will be very helpful. So we'll see you in the next segment. Welcome back to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. In this segment of the show, we've always done something educational in nature. We've had surveyors, home inspectors, commercial real estate brokers, a whole range of people who is involved in the real estate business. But of course, the people on the ground for us understand the day-to-day operation of real estate are our great realtors. And we have one of our repeat guests, one of our great realtors with us today, Eileen Cain of William Ravis Real Estate.
Yep.
And we're going to talk a little bit about, first of all, about her business, but I want to get into conversations about barriers to home ownership. And there are barriers out there right now. And I know you're on the ground, you've been doing this for a while, and you would have a lot to add to the conversation.
Yes.
So first, let's tell our viewers how you got into the real estate business.
21 years ago, I was a legal secretary in Boston doing legal recruiting. And my ex and late father-in-law, Paul Quincy Real Estate, was a longtime big broker in Brockton, and thought I'd be good at the job. So I jumped in and got my license, went part-time for a couple of years, and it was pretty lucrative right away. I was very lucky, so I left the full-time career and have been doing real estate ever since.
So you have your own little version of, not the little version, your own version of the real estate, but you're also affiliated with William Ravis Real Estate.
Yes.
You want to explain that company?
I'm under their brand. So they are a family-owned company. They've been in the business for over 50 years, 9 states. And even during this difficult time in real estate, the broker owner, Bill Ravis, is buying up smaller company. We're growing and growing and growing. So he believes in a tough economy, uncertain economy, lean in, not back. Okay. And so he is just, so we're doing great.
Yeah, real estate's cyclical. We all know that.
Certainly is.
We're in a funky market right now.
Funky market. Yeah. That's a good definition.
Yeah, and there's still a sales happening. Mm-hmm. People think when real estate is down, nothing happens, but it's not at a pace we saw as recently as 3 years ago.
No.
So, again, the topic I think would be helpful for our viewers, and let's identify barriers to owning real estate and see if we can come up with some solutions.
Yeah. Barriers, lack of inventory.
Yeah.
Not much for you to buy. How can you buy, right? Barrier, interest rates. Barrier, employment, or the worry of future employment. Affordability, and fear.
Yeah.
Fear, I think, is the number one barrier to what I'm seeing right now is fear of the unknown.
So let's start with inventory. There was an article, I think it was in the Boston Globe recently, about how many people are afraid to make a move from their house and they're choosing to downsize in place.
Yeah.
And that kind of stops the cyclical flow of real estate when people downsize and people get their starter homes and move up and it's kind of frozen. How do we break that logjam?
Well, the good news is people can live in their homes longer, right? So there's something exists that didn't exist before, which is a lot of in-home care, and it's keeping people in their homes longer, which is great. That's a wonderful gift. The negative side is if somebody does choose to downsize and they haven't identified a property or paid for that property and they're going to be in a situation where they do have to remortgage, get into a mortgage, they're not going to leave a 3% interest rate for 6.5%.
Right.
So it is causing a stall. We're seeing a lot of, multifamily generational living again for affordability. That is another thing.
Yeah, so it seems to me that, clearly downsizing can be a good thing.
Yes.
You're paying less taxes, you're paying less on electricity and gas and all of that stuff.
Upkeep.
If you go from a vacant, with 2-bedroom vacant, a family, and you can go buy a two bedroom
Yeah.
and eliminate the two and live happily ever after.
Yeah.
But it's not happening.
Not as much as we'd like. Again, homeownership people are able to stay there longer. They're choosing to stay there longer. It's certainly been a little bit of a halt. So we have a big buyer demand out there. We really, in spite of the interest rates not being 3, in spite of them, they're at 6.5, which is still, it's a good interest rate still. Not in comparison to 2020 COVID rates, but it's still a great interest rate. So we do have big buyer demand in spite of that, which is good. But again, we just don't have those signs. I was driving here and I thought, my goodness, remember in 2008, 2009, 2000, sign every 10 houses. We just, you see one and you nearly drive off the road trying to, wait, there's a sign there. So, yeah.
So, and I think you and I would have expected the Federal Reserve to make more moves. And there's a variety of things going on in our world and in our local economies that have kind of stalled their decisions too.
Yes. Yes.
And although you and I may remember how high interest rates were many years ago, many of the new home buyers, you're right, look back 3 years ago, when you can get a 3% mortgage, and it's double or more than that now, and that scares people off.
Scares people up. Not enough. The buyer, like I said, the buyer pool's still out there. It's more the lack of inventory. I took buyers out last week, and we offered a great offer on a property, minimal contingencies, and we got smoked. I mean, we were $100,000 off, and we went over. So, but then the flip side is you will still see. We're seeing some price improvements in the market. If things aren't selling in the first 3 weeks, you've got a pricing problem. So we are seeing that. We're seeing busy open houses. We're seeing slow. It's really, I was just talking to a colleague, it's almost undefinable. It's hard to pinpoint exactly. There's a variation of things going on.
I'm hearing from people that 2 or 3 years ago, you'd have 20 people show up in an open house, and it's not as competitive as it was then.
Yes.
So.
Yes. It depends on the town. It depends on the zip code. It depends on the inventory. It depends on the demand. It depends on the style.
Yeah. We're very diverse.
Very diverse.
Towns and even within Plymouth County.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm very concerned. I thought we'd be moving faster by now, but I guess the cyclical nature of real estate has not cycled back up again.
No. I mean, we've had this conversation a number of times where is it? And now it's even more, depleted. Again, election year tends to stall things. There's a lot going on in the world and the economy, and there just is. And so, but it's steady as we go. And regardless of the market, regardless of the inventory, if you can afford a home, if you're going to be paying rent, and you can afford to go up just a little bit more and have that home ownership, John, it's still worth swinging the bat. There's nothing. So home ownership brings you security, right? It brings you security because it's your home to decide what to do with it. Regardless of the market, and I knew this conversation was going to be different than our normal conversations, home ownership will always bring you peace of mind, security, and that extra cushion that you need, and eventually equity.
It also is one of the few things that builds wealth. And people that have never owned real estate or don't have the opportunity to own real estate aren't going to benefit by paying off their mortgage and getting more equity every time they make a payment.
Yep, or having that opportunity when the market is high and your values are high to grab maybe a home equity line or something like that to do some improvements for the what ifs, for the why nots. When you have a home, you get to borrow from the home for the what ifs and the why nots. And if you don't have that, you'll never have that. You're paying somebody else's mortgage. You're making somebody else rich.
A lot of people who own homes have used equity in the home to pay off college,
Pay off debts.
pay off
They
debt.
absolutely
Yeah.
have, and they were able to do that, especially with the price increase.
So you mentioned that the job issue, and clearly the job issue is more concerning today than it was last year.
Yes.
And the issue of consumer confidence has sunk significantly since last year. And I'm not sure, it's going to take some time to build that back up again. But if you're a young person looking to get into the housing market and you have confidence to move forward if you had the opportunity, it's very frustrating for them.
Yeah, you're going to have to swing the bat a number of times.
Yeah.
And the truth be told is you'll land where you're supposed to land, and it's better to swing into the mess than to not. The alternative.
Right.
So if you don't have an alternative, if you're not living in mom and dad's basement and you're paying rent, it's best to just get out there. And again, affordability awards you that.
Yeah.
Then yes.
So you're using the term "get up to bat."
Yeah.
What would you advise people to do so when they get up to bat, they're prepared to swing?
Offer their firstborn child, no, or the one they like the least. Almost not kidding.
Yeah.
We look at terms as the list side. I'm heavy on the list side, typically the sell side. We do look at the terms, but don't forego important things that are important to you, such as a home inspection. If a homeowner doesn't have anything to hide, a home inspection is certainly acceptable. We're putting in aggregates, though. We're telling the seller anything under $10,000, we won't bother you. We're not going to nitpick. We just want to be able to get our eye in there. And you could do things like waiving appraisal gap. If you can afford it and you could waive that appraisal gap, that's okay to do. Waiving an appraisal gap is not a negative thing.
Yeah.
It's just another conduit to get you into the house. And again, just if you've got money to put down when the interest rates are higher, take that money from your low earning savings account and put it down in that mortgage. When the interest rates were lower, we saw 3% and 5% down. Now we're going back to the 20 to offset that higher interest rate, right? So put it on that home. The VA loan will allow you to no money down. But I'm seeing my VA's buyers, they're still putting the money down.
Yeah. So how do you prepare yourself financially to get into that position?
Be smart.
Yeah.
To be in the know is the most important thing. Know what you have coming in, where it's coming from. This is what I tell my children. Know how to make it, know how to nurture it, know how to invest it, know how to hold it. And that comes from educating. Talk to your lenders, talk to your real estate agent, talk to your parents, and figure out where you're going to earn the most money. My son is about to get his license. He's had his money in high interest CDs to make sure that he can capitalize on his, on his purchase. It's important to be in the know. Years ago, you weren't in the know. Our parents didn't talk about money. I didn't know if we had any or didn't have any. We had the same as most of our friends, But now, you've got to over-communicate and plan and budget and set goals.
And realize what you can afford.
And realize what you can afford. Stay within your means. Stay within your means, but also, enjoy yourself as well.
Right.
Don't be house poor.
Yeah.
The perimeters, a lender will say will take up to 42% of your earnings to put towards a mortgage. That's reasonable. Going up over that, you're starting to squeeze into the extras. Know what the extras are. There are extras.
Right.
Your mortgage, your taxes, your insurance is just one part of it. It's the rest of it. The what if, the why nots. The what if, the why nots.
How do you build a reserve account for your boiler going out,
Exactly. And pay attention to your stuff once you do own your house. Pay attention to what's in your building. It's yours, right? So I do walkthroughs all the time to check and make sure that my systems are okay. Treat them well, right? Because it's your investment.
So I think that covers the first part of it.
Okay.
So let's try to do the crystal ball thing, which is really harder than it used to be.
It is. It is. So spring market, we're heading to our second quarter.
Yes.
Typically, our second quarter is the most generous quarter of all, where we see abundance is not going to happen. More product, more homes. Let's see. We're going to be working, real estate agents are going to work through the end of the year. It used to be sort of seasonal. Now we are It's going to be a busy, I'm hoping, rest of the year.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use the word abundant.
Yeah, people have to make moves too. I
They
mean,
move.
if you have too much house, your children have moved away, you really need to consider downsizing and saving expenses.
And you want to.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the point where you can have that easier living and let the young couple come in and
Right.
mow that 2-acre, lot. Divorce, death, relocation, job promotions, all the things. They're all part of life. That's all. One of those are going to happen in your lifetime. It is going to cause a real estate transaction. It just is.
So why should a buyer list their home now?
What you said?
Seller.
Why should a seller?
List their home now?
Well, because they're going to have a lot of. The demand is so
Yeah, right.
high.
You're going to
right?
get a good price.
You're going to get a good price. If you're going to list and buy, it's a wash. It really is a wash because you're going to be listing high and buying high unless you want to move down to, I don't know, Alabama or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So move locations where the pricing isn't so high. So it's a considerable seller's market right now.
So one of the hottest discussions now are the things that are pretty much allowable under the governor's new housing plan, accessory dwelling units. Have you seen much of that?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I like the concept.
Yeah.
I like the concept, and I think it's a cool thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's a cool thing. It'll loosen up give us a little bit more inventory if that happens.
Right.
So it depends on the family dynamics.
Have you talked to any home builders about the impact of some of the national decisions that may drive up the cost of building?
It already has. I mean, the cost of materials is, it's high right now. Yet I am seeing additions go on. I am seeing new construction still.
Right.
But also, we talk about the cost of everything. But one important factor, John, is look at the money that people are making right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
Affordability is pretty good. I mean, there are some young couples making double digits combined income. I mean, there's a lot of money as well out there. So you worry about these mortgage rates or potential monthly mortgage payments, but then I'm also seeing young couples, whether they're entrepreneurs, educated, contractors, plumbers, everyone's busy, which means you're making money.
Yes.
Which means, so it's keeping our flow.
Very difficult to get a contractor to do a small project these days.
If you're going to do a project, get 3 to 4 bids. I'm doing a project right now, and some of the bids were just crazy. And I don't tell them I'm a real estate agent. I know that stuff. And I just thought, oh, goodness gracious. So this is a contractor that's going to move me in if he can get that premium bumps. Yeah, so do that. And talk to your real estate agents about who we know, because we know a lot of people. But so I went with a couple of people I know and then just kind of spread out a little bit. But yeah, get your bids.
So you always recommend home inspections?
I do, only because you've never lived in the home. I've never lived in the home. I personally waived a home inspection when I bought my house in Canton.
Right.
I've been in this for a long time.
Sure.
I saw the service tags, one owner, he was an engineer, he loved on his home. But a home inspection is to educate you on a property that you've never stepped foot in. It's okay to walk through with a professional. And the seller should be okay with that as well.
Of course they should be.
If all was done okay.
Yeah.
And if there has to be some minor adjustments after an inspection, fine. Rarely does somebody walk away after an inspection.
Yeah.
Rarely.
So I think you've given some great advice. I do agree what you laid out are barriers to home, and they're all different. And let's hope one of them has changed and we get back on regular course.
I'm hoping.
Great.
Right? Be hopeful. Nothing stays the same.
Well, thank you very much, as always.
Thank you so much.
Great. Well, welcome back to the Register's Report. Again, my name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds for Plymouth County. I want to thank Eileen Cain for the great job she did as an experienced realtor talking about the different barriers to home ownership. She's been a person on the ground for many years, and her thoughts are very important to the conversation about how do we move the real estate market forward. In this segment of the show, we always do something a little lighter in nature, some of our Plymouth County and Plymouth Colony history, holidays for the month. Mardi Gras was the 4th, Ash Wednesday the 7th, Daylight Savings Time began on the 9th, St. Patrick's Day was yesterday at the time of the show, and spring equinox is the 20th. So in Plymouth County, which has one of the largest percentages of lineage to Ireland, we always talk about St. Patrick's Day month, not St. Patrick's Day. So a few of our notable records that I'll be talking about will go right into some very famous people of Irish roots that have connections to Plymouth County. First one is John Boyle O'Reilly, definitely an interesting person. He was born in Ireland, was in the British Army. When he was convicted for Fenian activities, supporting Ireland over England, he was convicted, sentenced to death, but then sentenced to Australia, a penal colony. He escaped from Australia and came to Boston. He became a leader in the Irish community in Boston, became the editor of the Pilot, the Irish Catholic newspaper. And in 1880, he purchased a summer home in Hull. And in 1889, he had the house demolished and he built a new one. That property is still the Hull Public Library. He was an important figure in assimilating the Irish into America. And he was, as an example, he was invited to be the keynote speaker at the dedication of the National Monument to the Forefathers in Plymouth. He died in Hull in 1890, but there's a monument in his name in the Fenway section of Boston. The next name is certainly a well-known sports figure for that era, but John L. Sullivan, the Boston Strong Boy, was a bare-knuckle fighter. He fought under the old rules long before the Marquess of Queensberry rules, and he was notable for winning so many heavyweight fights that he became a legend in the Irish community and in the sports community across America. He fought a 75-round fight in 1889, which will be the last significant bare-knuckle fight in boxing. His only loss came at the hands of gentleman Jim Corbett. After he lost to Corbett, he vowed he would never fight again. His connection to Plymouth County is he retired to a 60-acre farm on Hancock Street in Abington, which he then inherited from his wife, and he lived there until his death in 1918. So the next Plymouth County connection, everyone's heard of the saying, Kilroy was here. Not many people know Kilroy lived in Plymouth County. Kilroy was a rivet checker at Fort River Shipyard. People got credit for how many rivets they connected when they were building the steel ships in Quincy, and they get paid per rivet. So a lot of people were claiming other people's work. So Kilroy went around and he signed his name. Kilroy was here to make sure they got paid for the welded areas of metal he was inspecting. The slogan caught on and it became known throughout the world, particularly in World War II. The American servicemen brought it with them and started writing Kilroy here as a great signal that America was strong. The slogan has caught on, and he remains a very popular figure. Last but not least is our Plymouth colony record. We always try to do one Plymouth colony record since the Plymouth 400. Plymouth colony started at the arrival of the Mayflower in 1620. Plymouth colony included Bonneville County, Bristol County, all the way to Tiverton, Rhode Island. But it was run by a colonial court. So in 1663, long time ago, way before the American Revolution and the Constitution, the colonial court, with some familiar names in it, Josiah Winslow, Thomas Southworth, even William Bradford, who was a colonial governor for many years, made a decision that upon the motion of Mr. Hadley and Mr. Tildus, that this widow who lived in Scituate would be able to sell liquors. And as long as she followed the rules at the time, which was no liquor on the Sabbath, on the celebrating a Mass or services, she could sell liquors to individuals not less than a gallon at a time. So we consider her one of the first liquor store owners in America. And that it will be on display at the Registry of Deeds on the last Friday of the month, second floor of the registry. We have a colonial storage and reading room. We hope you can join us. So I want to thank Luna Green Baker and Christine Richards for helping me put this show together. I want to thank the folks here at the local scene for letting me share information on what for most people is their home, which is their most valuable asset. So thank you very much. Hope you had a great St. Patrick's Day. We'll see you next month.